Well, hello, Dirtfish Rally friends, and welcome back to my kitchen table. How long has it been since I sat here and talked to you? Well, there's one simple answer to that. Far, far too long. Should I apologise? I probably should, but listen, there's been so much for you to indulge your rally passion in over the past 6 months or so since the last kitchen table. Spin the Rally Pod. Hopefully you subscribe to that on dirtfish.com. David Evans's wonderful writing and the stories that he keeps breaking. But I know that the kitchen table is a little bit different, and I know that you people want to see it more regularly. So that is my promise to you all. A regular kitchen table for you. What does regular mean? Well, hopefully once every couple of weeks for you. Fingers crossed, once every couple of weeks. But you know what I've always said about the kitchen table? The most important thing is that there is something to talk about. I don't want to bore you if there's nothing to talk about. But my goodness me, this week in the world of rallying, there is plenty to talk about. That is for sure. Let's go back to the start, shall we? The start of the week. And it was that announcement, that slightly strange announcement. I'd have to say, well, it wasn't there wasn't an announcement. Once again, it was the world's greatest rallying journalist, David Evans, that broke the story. Christian Loriaux heading across to Hyundai. Or was he? Or was he? That was the story. What was that? Tuesday evening. Wednesday morning, we then get, well, a little bit more detail. And it turns out he's not leaving M Sport, Christian Loriaux. It's a part-time job at Hyundai, looking after purely the rally side of things. Loriaux will still be involved in the racing. So remember, Christian Loriaux, he is a genius. There's no question about that. He is a design genius. And for the past 7 or 8 years or so, he's been working on the Bentley racing program at M Sport. He's not really been involved so much in the rallying program. Chris Williams is the man that's done an amazing job there. But as I say, it's all very odd. It's all very, very odd. Loriaux will look after the rally side of things at Hyundai, who themselves have a burgeoning track racing program, from nothing. They're involved in all sorts of circuit racing these days and doing very, very well. Loriaux, I assume, won't be involved in that. He is purely at Hyundai to look at the rally side of things. He will still be an M Sport employee when it comes to their racing program. And don't forget, they have this contract to provide racing engines. I can't off the top of my head remember the name of the series, but they've got a contract to supply, and it's a great contract, to supply racing engines to one of the top line series in circuit racing, and I'm sure that will be Loriaux's project as well. Very, very strange news, that. A very odd setup. But what it does mean, and we talk a lot about it on Spin the Rally Pod this week, what it does mean, it shows that Christian Loriaux has never, ever been a conformist. He's always been a maverick. He's always been one to push the boundaries. And genius is an overused word in motorsport. I think it's a word that fairly applies to Loriaux. Clearly, his stock is very, very high. I'll tell you why I think the move to Hyundai came about. I think it came about because of Tänak. I think this is the second part, isn't it, of the news that's come out this week. Tänak and Neuville both signing long-term deals. Now, I'm not entirely sure that that's been quantified. Whether it's long-term or multi-year deal is, I think, what we've been told. 2-year deal, 3-year deal, 4-year deal. 4 would seem fanciful. I don't think they'll have signed a 4-year deal. 2, I don't know. That probably is more than likely, but 3 is very possible. Both Tänak and Neuville, strong commitment from Hyundai to those drivers. But was one of Tanak's conditions of signing that contract, hang on a minute, you have to get Loriaux involved in this project. Because clearly there is a bit of an issue with the Hyundai on tarmac. Now, we saw Mikkelsen there, couldn't get to grips with it. We saw Sebastian Loeb there, couldn't get to grips with the car on tarmac. We've seen Craig Breen finding it difficult to get to grips with a car on tarmac. The guy who can drive that car on tarmac clearly is the guy who developed it. That is Thierry Neuville. But has Tänak gone along and said, well, guys, if you want me to sign this deal, and I still think that right now Tänak is the best driver in the world, he's the fastest driver in the world, I still think Tänak has that kind of sway where he can turn around and say, look, bring in Loriaux, see what you can do. If you can bring Loriaux in, I'm yours, I am with you on this journey that we're part way along, and you'd have to say not massively successfully part way along. That relationship, that story with Hyundai and Tanak has not produced as yet the kind of harmony that perhaps we were looking for. The harmony was there quite clearly with the Toyota, and he was invincible, Tänak. He had this air about him which said, boys, you might as well park the car in the garage. I'm going to win this stage. I'm going to win this rally. I'm going to win this championship. He hasn't lost any of that ability. But, it's not just about the driver, and it's never just about the driver. It's never just about the car. It's a combination, isn't it? Tanak in the M Sport car, magnificent. Could he have won a world title if he'd stayed at M Sport? Potentially. Tanak and the Toyota, just a wonderful pairing, and that is where this invincible Tanak came from. Tanak and Hyundai, bleh, bleh, stuttering. Signs of genius. And you'd have to say Rovaniemi was genius. And then signs of, despair, is that a word? Despondency? Perhaps both those words are too strong. But no signs of the invincible Tanak on tarmac that we've seen in the past. And do you know what? You'd have to say Croatia didn't give us much hope in that regard. There is still work to do. All of a sudden, 2 weeks after Croatia, forget about those problems. I'm signing a multi-year deal with you, Mr. Adamo. Is that down to Christian Loriaux? I suspect in part it is. There's a very, very strong relationship between Loriaux and Tanak's mentor/manager, Marco Martin. I suspect that something's going on there. In the corporate world, that deal that Christian Loriaux has negotiated is practically unheard of. Never mind in the motorsport world, but in the corporate world. And it shows the trust, because the relationship there, or the deal that's been done, relies almost entirely on trust. Malcolm Wilson trusts and respects Christian Loriaux, and he will respect Loriaux's word. If Loriaux says, look, I will not make any efforts to take any of the IP, any of the technologies, any of the learnings from the M Sport Fiesta, or whatever it might be, M Sport Fiesta, that's what the mule is. We're expecting something different when it comes out next year, but I will take none of that to Hyundai. And likewise, in the motor racing program, we won't take any, there'll be no crossover there either, basically. So Mr. Wilson trusts him, Mr. Adamo trusts him, and it's a sign of how good the man is, and he will get that car working for Tänak. I'm absolutely sure of that. Thierry Neuville, he had options. Tanak and Neuville had options. Goodness me. The option was stay at Hyundai. I don't think there's an option for Toyota, but that is possible. Maybe there were behind-the-scenes discussions with Toyota for Thierry Neuville. I wouldn't 100% write that off, but I think Neuville very much nailed his colours to the Hyundai car many, many years ago. And his best bet of success, for sure, in the World Championship is with Hyundai. I say that. I don't know. I'm in a quandary. I think Neuville did the right thing. But Neuville as lead driver, M Sport next year. M Sport, remember 2017, new cars. M Sport, tiny M Sport compared to the might of what was at the time Hyundai and their budget. Toyota and their budget. Citroen and their budget. And you had M Sport. Tiny, teeny budget. But they came out with an all-conquering car, didn't they? With an all-conquering driver. They were last to testing with that 2017 car. If I remember correctly, Toyota had something like between 15 and 20,000 kilometres of testing, and I think M Sport had 6,000 kilometres of testing on their 2017 car before it went to Monte Carlo. What we know is that design team, led by Chris Williams, they get it right. They get it right out the box. The budget is there to develop the car from Ford. What has happened with the 2017 project is there hasn't been the budget to reinvest and to keep continually improving that car. And that is why we've seen that M Sport car. Yes, they've lost Ogier, and that was a big blow for sure. Ogier was a man that worked in harmony with that car and brought tremendous success. But, I think that if you were to put money on what will be the fastest, most reliable car in 2021, my money would be on M Sport. So Thierry Neuville, is where this slight tangent came from. Thierry Neuville, has he done the right thing in staying at Hyundai? Probably. Would he have won rallies in the M Sport car? Certainly. Would he have won the championship? Possibly. But that's rallying for you. Lots of possibles, lots of probables, lots of maybes in there. But what's happened with this announcement this week? That Neuville and Tanak are staying. It puts real pressure now on M Sport and Malcolm Wilson. They will make a car that is very, very capable of winning the World Championship in 2021. But to do that, you have to marry that car with a driver, as they did in 2017 with Sébastien Ogier. What are their options for next year? Their options are very, very limited. There is an elite in terms of world rallying. There's very much an elite. Drivers who are capable of fighting for the championship. Drivers who can win any rally. And there aren't many of them. There really aren't many. You've got your two drivers at Hyundai. You've clearly got Tänak and Neuville. You've got Evans at Toyota. And you've got Rovanperä at Toyota. Now, a couple of years ago, you would have chucked... okay, we can still talk about Ogier. Clearly Ogier is a possibility for next year. So there's 5 right now that are in that elite. I'd have said Chris Meek was in that group as well when he was at Toyota. Potentially didn't realise that full potential. So maybe 6 drivers were in that elite who can fight for championships, who can certainly fight for wins on every single event. M Sport need one of those drivers next year. There aren't any available. Now, jump up and down. Elfyn Evans. He's got a contract till the end of the year with Toyota. He's available. He ain't going anywhere. I'm telling you now. I would be absolutely astonished if Elfyn Evans left Toyota. He's got a great relationship with Jari-Matti Latvala. He's got a great relationship with the team. He has come on in leaps and bounds since he joined that team. Next year, if Ogier goes, now I know Toyota don't declare lead drivers, but you have your experienced driver, and then you have your drivers who are less experienced. He will be the most experienced driver in that team, and he will be number 1 driver in everything other than name in the Toyota team next year. Ably supported by Kalle Rovanperä, who will win rallies next year, I suspect. And quite possibly, their number 3 driver will be Katsuta-san, because he has been quite a revelation for some, not for me. I go back, I predicted that Katsuta would surprise a few this year, and I think he already has. I think, there's 3 there within that Toyota fold who all thrive in that environment. And I don't see anything changing. The only spanner in the works, maybe, if Ogier decides to stay on, and then things may change a little bit. The one to lose out, if he did do that, clearly would be Katsuta-san. But Katsuta-san won't lose out because he'll get a program anyway. So I think things are settled at Toyota. For me, Evans technically is available. Realistically, he ain't available. He really isn't. So there's a huge problem, a huge issue at M Sport. Who do you put in a car which you're Malcolm Wilson, you know that your team is building a car that can win rallies. It ain't going to win rallies unless you put the right driver in it. Who do you go with? Formaux, goodness me, massive gamble. Formaux is a talent, a huge talent. On the back of one event, you can't judge how big a talent he is, but he is pretty huge. I'd have to say he does seem to have the necessary tools, potentially, to kick on and establish himself as a top-line rally driver. But it's 2 seasons too early for him. You might say, well, Sunonen is still part of the team. He very much is. Sunonen needs to kick things up a gear or maybe 2 gears to be considered a regular rally winner. Gus Greensmith, you know what, he's still very, very, very much in the learning stages. So any one of those drivers could easily be involved in the M Sport program next year, but that doesn't solve your problem. Your problem is your driver who can go to every single rally and potentially deliver wins. Well, there's a whole host of drivers who would dearly love that opportunity. I'll go down in what I think is the order that I would be looking at. Let me, before I go into talking about who I think could be in that seat, what I would say about all of these drivers is they're all going to have to invest, and they're all going to have to get in World Rally cars this year, 2 or 3 rallies, and show what can be done. Now, one of them may well already have 2 or 3 rallies as part of Hyundai, but the others are all going to have to invest at this point. So, my number 1 driver. My number 1 driver would be Jari-Matti Latvala, and a lot of people are saying, I said that on Twitter this morning, and it provoked a fair amount of debate. If Latvala had not signed as team boss at Hyundai, I'd have said Latvala was probably, or would probably, have been the number 1 pick for me. Latvala, proven winner, A man who still, from a driving perspective, has something to prove in rallying. A man who Malcolm Wilson once said, and sadly wasn't proven right, and Malcolm Wilson is rarely wrong, but he was on this occasion, probably about 15 years ago, said to me, Jari-Matti Latvala, he said, whatever records Sebastian Loeb sets in his career, Jari-Matti Latvala will beat. Sadly, that didn't transpire. Latvala, as a driver, has unfinished business. And I tell you what, that is a burning desire that delivers extra, delivers a whole lot extra for you if you're running a team. But Latvala is not available, clearly. Well, I don't think so anyway. You know, might he have had a clause in his contract with Toyota that said if he gets offered a factory seat as a driver? Possible, really possible. Probable, no. Latvala, I think, has made his decision, and he is not available. So, of those who are realistically available, and we're going to take Ogier out of this equation. He may turn up for the odd event next year. Full season, not sure. Not sure he would jump ship with Toyota, to be honest with you, if he was offered drives next season. So let's forget about Ogier. Andreas Mikkelsen, top of the list. Again, similar to Latvala, a driver who has been talked about as a potential championship winner all his career and has never really delivered the goods. You know, Mikkelsen is a proven rally winner. What is it, 3 or 4 wins? A proven competitor. He had a tough old time at Hyundai. But you know what? Lots of people have gone to Hyundai and had a tough old time of it. But what he needs to do, get himself into a World Rally car. Win or finish his WRC 2 commitments with TalkSport in the Skoda. Get himself into a World Rally car and show that he still has that desire, that ability to, as a minimum, fight for podiums. Because you ain't winning rallies unless you're fighting for podiums. So top of my list would be Mikkelsen. Second on my list, or joint top, I really don't know, Craig Breen. Craig Breen is a man who has proven himself time and time again. Given an opportunity, delivers. Take Croatia out of that argument. To expect him to jump into a World Rally car on tarmac for the first time in yonks and deliver a podium-winning performance or a podium-placing performance, I think was unrealistic. He did what he had to do for the team. He delivered points on the power stage, and he was there. After he had that puncture on that roundabout on the Saturday, I think it was, he was never, ever, ever going to be showing his pace in that rally. But Craig Breen is a man who can deliver. As a man who can drive remarkably quickly. He's very adept. He's driven lots of cars. He had lots of seat time over the past few years. He will adapt nicely to the demands. And the demands of the 2021 car are very, very different from the current World Rally car. And in some ways are more akin to the R5 car or the Rally 2 car, as we'll be calling it next year. No active diff, all sorts of things that will be different about that car. Craig Breen, for me, has to be a serious, serious consideration. Here's the other thing about Breen. Whereas for Mikkelsen, he's won rallies, and he's won rallies, 1 or 2 of them, fair and square. Okay, his first rally he won because Ogier crashed on the final stage in Spain, but he has won rallies fair and square. So we've seen really him delivering at his very best. I don't think as yet we've seen Breen delivering at his very best. I think Breen has enjoyed, I've talked about it many times, Breen, Rovanperä, in terms of Rovanperä, in terms of his development, it's like that. It's the most incredible parabola, to use a silly word, a long word. I think it's parabola. Is parabola one that kind of bends? Okay, we'll say it's an ascent, shall we? Rovanperä has been like that. Breen has been more like that. It's been more of a steady rise. And I don't think yet that Breen has reached his zenith. He's not reached his peak form. Remember, he's never had a full season in the WRC. So, for me, it's a difficult one. Mikkelsen, Breen. Breen, Mikkelsen. I am not sure. I am really not sure. If I had to, I'd toss a coin. And if I absolutely had to, I wouldn't. I really couldn't. I couldn't say which one will be best suited to that M Sport car. But Breen and Mikkelsen are 2 real possibilities. Now, the third driver on my list would, without any question, be Hayden Paddon. Paddon has something unique. He has the experience of working with high-performance electric rally cars. No one else has got that experience. He understands the challenges. He also is an absolute professional. Get him involved early enough, and he will help develop that car. He's not match fit. There are lots of rallies now that he's never been to, or a number of rallies that he's never been to. He's another one that needs to do more or less what I'm saying Mikkelsen needs to do and get himself into a car. He needs to invest. He needs to say, look, I am going to take some money. I'm going to invest in the potential for the seat, and we'll see where it takes me. You know, a lot of people saying, well, you know, Hayden Paddon is inextricably linked with Hyundai New Zealand. Yeah, he is. But what we've seen from the boss of Hyundai New Zealand is he's a realist. He's a realist who understands Hayden Paddon competing and winning in the World Rally Championship ultimately is a good thing for him. Mr. Hyundai New Zealand is a good thing for rallying in New Zealand, and will sell cars for him, even if it's in a Ford. And we saw that last year. Remember, like 2 years ago now, was it maybe 3 years ago? Certainly 2 years ago, wasn't it? Where he had that opportunity in Finland in the M Sport car, paid for, in part, by Hyundai New Zealand. But the boss understood the value in getting Paddon back into the World Rally Championship. I don't think Hyundai New Zealand will be a barrier that is not, that they can't cross. You know, I think there is something there for Hayden Paddon potentially that can be done with his commitments that he has if he were to be in a position where Mr. Wilson picked the phone up and said, there's a 2-year deal for you, there's a 3-year deal for you. For Mr. Wilson to do that, Hayden Paddon has to get himself out of New Zealand into Europe. He has to drive 3 rallies in a World Rally car. What will that cost him? A lot of money, an awful lot of money. Maybe certainly upwards of €500,000 if someone's being generous and giving him a discounted drive. Possibly as much as €1 million if he's paying for just about the whole thing himself. So Paddon is at that point where he has to decide what he's doing. There's an opportunity here for Paddon in the World Rally Championship. Again, unfinished business. But he's going to have to once again invest in it. I think if Paddon invests, you'd almost put him up there. Almost. With Mikkelsen, with Breen, with Paddon. Now, there are other drivers. I've already mentioned Teemu Sunninen. I'm not convinced, sadly, that he's the man. He yet is to prove himself. And he might do before the end of the year. And if he does, the pressure is on Sunninen with these opportunities he gets in the World Rally car. If he can perform, puts himself in box seat. Esa-Pekka Lappi, another one. You know, has he got backers who can find some money to get him into potentially an M Sport World Rally car before the end of the year? Because we know that he's another driver, and we keep talking about this unfinished business. Your winner in the WRC never kicked off, sadly. Never kicked off at Citroën. You know, it just never got going really for him, did it? Poor old Esa-Pekka Lappi. And at Toyota, well, I just don't know what happened at Toyota. It was very, very odd indeed. But he never managed to make things work there either. So, you know what? There's those drivers. There are others that you might throw into the mix. There is Mads Osberg. Throw him into the mix. Why not? Guy who has spent more time in a rally car, developing a rally car, than just about anyone else recently. Throw him into the mix for sure. You know, and as I say, one or two others as well that you might consider. But for me, the top 3 have to be the one I haven't mentioned. Crumbs. I was like, rack my brain. I was thinking, I've missed someone. Sebastian Loeb. Of course, Sebastian Loeb. Not available for Monte Carlo because he's committed to Dakar. Man who's proved everything in his career. A man who doesn't have to really rewrite the history books. He might rewrite the history books if he comes back, but he doesn't have to. There's no pressure on him. Would he be my first choice? No, sadly not. And again, it's difficult because we're judging Sebastian Loeb on what we saw in the last 2 seasons in the Hyundai. Yeah, he had a fantastic event in Turkey when he did his last event, got himself a podium. Really good management of that event. But that's what he's good at. That's where he will show us just how brilliant he is, how much of a genius he is when there are situations that need to be dealt with. That win in the Citroën came about because of the most inspired tyre choice on the final morning. Only a man with Loeb's ability and, more importantly, experience could have taken that tyre choice. In Turkey, that podium, he managed to weave his way through that almost blinding dust on that terribly rocky road. And you know, he benefited by by looking after his car better than anyone. And again, that's experience. Does he have, though, ultimately, that edge still, that pace to compete with the Tanaks, the Neuvilles, the Rovanperas, the Evanses of this world on a level playing field? I'm not convinced that he has the desire to push that extra tenth. So I'm not putting him in my top three. Now, that might be very, very silly of me, but I'm not putting him in my top three. What I would say about all of these drivers is I don't think any of them are ideal. I think Malcolm Wilson has a real problem. A real problem. Someone has to up their game. One of those drivers, and they're all capable of it. They're all capable of upping their games. One of them has to step up before the end of the year, I suspect, and say, yeah, I'm in that elite, Mr. Wilson. I can compete on every rally for podiums. I will win you rallies in 2020, 2022. I said 2021 a number of times. I meant 2022. You know where I'm at. We've lost a year with this blooming COVID nonsense. So there we go, folks. It is difficult, and it's been great to read and to see your comments about this whole driver market. And it's unusual that it's kicked off so early. It really is unusual. But as my very wise colleague David Evans said this morning on our podcast, the reason in part that Tänak and Neuville have signed so early is they want to be involved in the development of the 2022 car. We've seen it in the past, drivers umming and ahhing and teams saying, well, until you commit to us, we're not letting you near our new car. Rightly so. We don't want you taking all of our really clever little innovations and gizmos and all the rest to whoever you might be driving for next year. I think Tänak and Neuville, unusually early, committing themselves to Hyundai, in part because they want to be heavily involved in how this car develops for 2022. Tänak has more interest in that than Neuville, for sure. For sure, Tänak wants new car, new beginning, old Tänak. But the big question, what do they do at M Sport? Who do they put in that car? We will wait and see. Folks, it's been a long one again. I really did try to keep this down to 20 or so minutes. I don't know how long we're at now, but we're beyond that 20 minutes, I suspect. Apologies for that. But it's been really great. It's been great to be back at the kitchen table talking to you. Don't forget, if you're watching this on my YouTube channel, if you could subscribe, that would be lovely. And if you can share it, the video, that would be super as well. If you're on Facebook, like it, share it, subscribe, whatever you have to do on Facebook, that'd be good. If you're watching on the Dirtfish channel, have you subscribed to our channels on Dirtfish? Be very good of you to do that for us too, folks. Thank you very much for joining me after such a long period of time at the kitchen table.